Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN, right here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here, hanging out with you. Those who are hanging out with me live here on the YouTube section, sorry we're running a little bit late. Just one of those mornings. Today was just one of those mornings. I got a couple dogs, and usually they're pretty good. They made a mess of the house here this morning. They were barking, they're crying, they're freaking out. You probably will hear them multiple times here. I don't know what the heck is going on. I was pouring coffee. I missed the cup all over the counter, all over the floor here today. So this day has not started off all that good for me, but we'll make it through. I'm seeing people hang out with us live, and I love it. I'm here for that. If you have any questions throughout the show, please leave them there in the YouTube section if you're following along on our FTN YouTube page. Subscribe. Leave a comment there. You have a question at any moment. I'll always circle back, before puck drop tonight, before first pitch in the MLB, tip off in the NBA, if you have any questions at all. It is a busy day in the sports world. The Braves are up 1-0. We're off to a good start. Backing Atlanta. Get to that game in a little bit. We're going to talk about game 2 this evening. Of course, we're going to talk about the NHL. We have 5 games on the ice. I'll be honest, I don't really love the card, but we'll attack some shot props. Yesterday was pretty good. We went 9 for 10 yesterday. The Canadiens screwed us. The Habs absolutely screwed us. I mean, why do we pick Montreal, right? I mean, it's the first time we picked them on this show, and maybe the last time we picked that team. So we got 4 for 5, with the sides and the totals. And then the shot props. We got super lucky, with Nikolai Ehlers. We did go 5 for 5 yesterday, but I mean, he had 0 shots with a minute and a half left in the game. I don't know if he caught the end of the Jets game last night, but he had a quick shot and then an offensive zone face-off, which he basically scored from the corner. And then he went off the ice, the Ducks iced the puck, and then they put him back on the ice, and then they scored right off the draw. And it easily could have been a goal to Paul Stastny. I still think it went off of his skate, but, books gave it a check mark, so we'll take it and we'll move on. We're going to get lucky. We're going to get unlucky, and all season long, and lucky to be on the right side of it. So hanging out here on Game Plus Network, we're going to try to continue to, get into a little bit of a rhythm here. I will plug the package one more time. I know maybe you're sick of hearing me say this, but ftnbets.com/pricing. If you just want to sign up for the monthly package, use the promo code NHL. You're going to get 20% off, and you're going to get everybody's picks across every sport. You got some tools there. Wide receiver cornerback matchup tool is probably my favorite tool going at FTN. You just, it's a football tool, but you get a lot out of it. Even if you don't play DFS, you can get something out of it in terms of betting props, receiving catches, yards or receptions. And you can also get a lot out of it from a season-long standpoint as well, from like a fantasy football, just to see who has the best matchups, the toughest matchups, where they line up, percentage of the routes they run in the slot, left side, right side, cornerback matchup tools, and a shadow index tool as well. And that's all courtesy of Jeff Ratcliffe. I mean, he's got his baby is it's fun. I like to look at it every single day, honestly, when it goes live. And that's how I kind of look at my football props. And when we get to that, we'll do that on Friday's show. So ftnbets.com/pricing, promo code NHL. On this show so far to start the week, we are 17 for 20 in the NHL. So hopefully we can keep going here today. I'm seeing some comments, some shot props we will get to a little bit later on in the show. And then my guy George, 3 putts for par, put back the Kraken. Maybe that's why my morning has gone so shaky here. Maybe I was sipping on too much Kraken last night watching Seattle put it to the Canadiens. So we will get to all of that as we do every single Wednesday. My guy Tino, running the show for us, producer Tino, is going to join us. We're going to talk about the most added and dropped fantasy football players in Yahoo, ESPN leagues, and also take a look at the most traded players as well. We usually do a buy low, sell high segment, but Justin Boone of The Score dropped by yesterday, and we talked really a lot of buy low and sell high candidates. You can go back and watch that. It's live over at our FTN YouTube page as well. It was a fun segment with Justin Boone. He had a couple interesting names that he would, flip and try to acquire. Guys like Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. Looking to acquire these guys, if you're up near the top of the standings, you can afford to take that risk with Russell Wilson coming back in a couple weeks. And on the flip side, Antonio Gibson, a guy who's, rumored to maybe get shut down here for Washington, dealing with an injury. He's been playing through it. I think it was like a chipped bone in his shin. I'm pretty sure that's what the injury is. He's played through that all of, the first 7 weeks of the season here, and reports out of Washington that it's not going to get better without any rest. And if you watched last week against the Packers, he didn't play in the last 17 minutes of the game. It was a lot of J.D. McKissick, and I know they were down in the game, but he wasn't getting in there and he wasn't touching the football. So I would be concerned. I would just take whatever you can get. I know we talk about selling people wouldn't, their stock is as high as it could possibly be. We're selling Gibson at a very low stock. But I think, honestly, you got to get what you can get at that point because he could potentially get shut down here. Before we, bring in Tino and talk football, I just want to talk about baseball for a little bit here. Yesterday, 6-2 Braves. We talked about being on the Braves yesterday in Game 1 and taking a shot on them to win the World Series here at plus money. Figured this series will go 7, even with Atlanta winning that game. The biggest reason I was in on the Braves was the pitching staff, and it was all about Charlie Morton for me. And Charlie Morton, we talked about yesterday with the success that he's had against the Astros, his former squad, knowing that team really well, pitching against them twice in the postseason last season as a member of the Rays. And he was really good in those 2 starts against Houston. And he was phenomenal yesterday, but my goodness, he takes a 102 mile an hour shot off the leg yesterday, breaks his leg, but just shrugs it off, pitches 10 pitches with a broken leg. So he tossed 10 pitches after that comebacker. He sat down for a half inning. Then he came back out and threw 6 more pitches, hit 96 on the gun, had an 80 mile an hour curve to strike out Jose Altuve, and then says, "That's it, I'm done." And he leaves. He could barely get off the mound and get to the dugout. And then you hear that he broke his leg. So the guy pitched 16 pitches with a broken leg and was awesome all game long before he left again. It's a big blow. They got that W, but my thinking was that this series would go the distance and we could get 2 performances out of Charlie Morton and maybe part of a third, depending on how things shook out. Like maybe he would have started game 4. If it went to 7, maybe he comes out of the pen and he gives him a couple innings as well. It's a huge loss. And it was just one arm, but it's a big loss. Charlie Morton is that vet. He keeps the ball on the ground. He's just such a solid pitcher and an underrated pitcher. So that is a huge blow for the Atlanta Braves. Today, the Astros are slight favorites here. It's basically a pick, and the total's at 8.5. We'll break it down in a little bit. It's Max Fried and Jose Urquidy for the Astros here today. I still like the Braves pitching staff. Talked about it yesterday. They keep the ball on the ground. They do a good job of limiting the damage. That's it with the Astros. You allow a couple singles here and there, and then they can take you yard and you put up a crooked number. But these pitchers that they're rolling out here, Fried and Ian Anderson here in the next game, Game 3, these guys have a track record of keeping the ball on the ground, low launch angles, and I think that could be the difference. But again, how about these Braves additions that they have made heading into the postseason? When they lost Ronald Acuna, they looked done. Mike Soroka, shout out to the Canadian boy. He didn't get to pitch for them this season. I'm pretty sure there was another guy inside that Braves rotation who went down. That's just kind of slipped my mind. But it's the guys that they picked up. Jorge Soler, leadoff bomb yesterday. Eddie Rosario's been great. Jock Peterson has been solid. And Adam Duvall went yard yesterday. These are all additions that they made when it looked like they were just done losing their star player and a few arms out of their pitching staff. So this from ESPN Stats and Info. You guys know I like my stats. Jorge Soler is the first player to hit a home run in the first plate appearance of a World Series. Soler is also the first DH to homer out of the leadoff spot in World Series history. Overall, the 5th player to hit a leadoff home run in Game 1 of the World Series, and first since 2017. I told you I'm off today. Something's wrong here. Anyways, pretty impressive stuff for Jorge Soler, who won't lead off today. Typically, he's not really a leadoff guy. He's a power guy. He strikes out quite a bit, doesn't have a lot of speed. They'll go with Eddie Rosario as a leadoff guy today, seeing a righty on the hill this evening with Urquidy. But good stuff for Jorge Soler. I like postseason storylines, and that's one of them. What's going on here with the Atlanta Braves and all the additions that they made. I hope they can pull this off. A couple injury items before we break and bring in Tino. Antonio Brown was spotted with crutches here today at practice, so if you're a Brown owner, you may need to look elsewhere. You may not be able to get him again this week. Gronk did return to practice, so it looks like he could return this weekend. Baker Mayfield it's possible that he can play. There's nothing confirmed with him. It's just possible. It's not a great sign. I think if you have Baker in a super flex, a 2-quarterback league, you probably have moved on. You need to look elsewhere. I don't think you can count on this guy the rest of the year. And then MVS could be activated. A lot of news coming out of Green Bay with that Thursday Night Football game tomorrow. Should be a great one. The Packers and the undefeated Arizona Cardinals at 7-0 against the 6-1 Green Bay Packers. But it doesn't look like Devontae Adams is going to play on the COVID list. And then Alan Lazard, who we'll get to, one of the most added players in fantasy over the last 24 hours, unfortunately came down yesterday that he's not going to play tomorrow ignore either. He is also on the COVID list, so it could be Randall Cobb's season. MVS is expected to be activated from IR, so I would imagine they plug him in because they could use him. And then Jerry Jeudy, also available, expected to be activated this week off the IR, member of the Denver Broncos. And on the way out, Bo Wolf of The Athletic. I respect you. I respect The Athletic. I respect your work. He says he would be surprised at this point if he doesn't see Gardner Minshew play for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I say, why? Why would you be surprised? Why won't they play Jalen Hurts? Why wouldn't they play Jalen Hurts? You think the reason the Eagles are losing is because of Jalen Hurts? 4 of the last 5 games, they've allowed a quarterback completion percentage of at least 80%. Jalen Hurts ain't playing defense, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Jalen Hurts and his accuracy and all of his fantasy points come in the fourth quarter. Who cares about that? Fantasy, real life, like, forget about that. There's some growing pains when it comes to Jalen Hurts. But what benefit do the Eagles have of rolling out Gardner Minshew as their quarterback? Don't you think they want to see what they have in Jalen Hurts? They're going to have 2 top 5 picks next season in the draft. They're going to draft a quarterback, most likely. But they're not going to be able to see truly what they have in Jalen Hurts unless they let him go the entire season. I think it's a bogus report. Not going to lie. I would be shocked if we saw Gardner Minshew line up for the Philadelphia Eagles. And like I said, I'll hold myself accountable here. I'll take the L if that's the case. Jalen Hurts is the start of the rest of the way. I don't think the Eagles are trading for Deshaun Watson. There's a lot of reports that Watson is going to be gone here in the next few days. Some of the reports that the only team he's willing to waive his no-trade clause to is Miami. It's nice that Watson just has all these rules. Like, he has all these things that, what he wants, what Deshaun Watson wants. Like, dude, you're lucky to even, have a chance to play in the NFL again. Let's be honest. Like, what you want. And you won't trade to this team and trade to that team. Like, I don't know. Watson's one of the most picked up players in fantasy. I left him off the top 10 board. We'll get to the other guys that are more notable and could actually help you out in fantasy next year on Mean Streets. Don't go anywhere. Things continue here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney and producer Tino here with you as we are every single Wednesday breaking down roster trends. I see potentially your mic may be muted, Tino, before we bring you in and you're ready to go now. I knew you'd be all over it. But, dude, was I too harsh there on Deshaun Watson? Like, who is this guy to say that he only wants to go to Miami? I mean, I don't want to dive into too much when it comes to Deshaun Watson, but he is one of the most added players. Somebody in my home league today traded for Jalen Waddle. He's been great, but his main reason for the trade was that he was going to get an upgrade at the quarterback position with Deshaun Watson going to Miami. I mean, there's nothing here concrete on Watson. There's some reports that he could get traded before the deadline and that it could be to Miami, but it's also not a lock that this guy's going to play football this league, Tino. And I think if you're banking on a boost in production from anybody in Miami, those wide receivers, or the fact that you think you're going to be able to roll out Watson here in fantasy over the next couple of weeks, you may be mistaken.
I don't blame him. I want to be in Miami too. That's the only place I want to go to. Maybe it's getting cold in New Jersey, so I don't blame Watson there. I think a lot of this is contingent on where the Texans stand on their demands to trade Watson. I don't even want to get into if this benefits players or not, because there's no doubting Deshaun Watson's a super talented dude. But last we checked, in the midst of this hype of the craze of what was going on in this scandal, they were still asking for several first-round picks and several players and picks in return. So I don't know. I think that package has to get substantially smaller, maybe a first in there. But I know they were asking for several firsts. So we will see. I don't want to read the tea leaves on this too much. Could have happened, sure. But If you're telling me some fantasy guys I want to buy that could potentially be traded, I'm kind of looking smaller than that. I've been holding Marlon Mack. We see some Evan Ingram maybe being traded news, please, if we're
Saw
lucky
that.
enough. If we're lucky
Yeah.
enough. So there's some guys out there you could probably get for free that might get traded into good situations. Zach Ertz was one of those guys that was still on waiver wires, and now people are going crazy over him. So, yeah, could it help the Dolphins, and could Watson be a good buy guy? Sure, but with all the baggage he brings, I wouldn't overpay for him. Dynasty, if it's there, it's there, but I wouldn't overpay for him.
Yeah, and I get it too. Yeah, he's a good quarterback, and in a dynasties, I think a different feel. Like if you want to go and try to buy low in this guy in a dynasty league, and you're out of it already this season, I think sure. Unfortunately, we have to spin this from a fantasy standpoint. You know what? I'm done talking about Watson. Let's just forget about it. Is Evan Ingram the Is he the most hated player in Giants history? Like, what's the deal, Ingram? Like, you told me when you go to the games, they boo this guy nonstop, right?
Yeah, and I know people have been vocal about it because he had a decent week this week, and it's like, oh, what? You're going to boo him because he's having success, and, like, the team's getting him involved. They don't have a choice, but his time is just done in New York. I'm at the point, it's nothing against the player anymore. Still think he has plenty to offer to teams and super talented. I think the reason Giant fans are frustrated with Ingram is that this deal could have got done 2 years ago. They could have traded him for more than what they're going to get him for this year, and we're probably looking at a Zach Ertz trade, very much similar. Well, late pick, 2 late picks, 4th and 5th rounders, where you trade him off a Pro Bowl season or the year before, or even after his rookie year, you're looking at maybe a first, maybe a second. I don't want to get too greedy here, but we're settling now, but it is what it is. As long as we get him off the team, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, football trades are weird, right? I mean, there's never really a strong return. I remember a few years ago, there was some fun in the NFL, actually, in the office at Anthem Sports and Entertainment in Toronto. I think we all freaked out a few years ago when LaShawn McCoy got dealt to Buffalo. I actually shed a tear. I didn't like it. It's like, Chip Kelly, what the heck are you doing? And then, like, moments after that, I think Jimmy Graham got flipped as well from the Saints maybe to Seattle, and that was, like, the craziness in the NFL, but you typically don't see these trades. I remember Brandon Marshall got flipped like in his prime for like a couple mid to late round picks too. Like nothing spectacular there. Let's take a look at the most added players here in fantasy football as waivers ran last night in Yahoo for most standard leagues. We've said this before on the show. If you could push it back to like Thursday at 2 a.m, do that. I think it's beneficial for everybody in your league. You get that extra day of practice reports. No surprise here to see Kenneth Gainwell up at the top. CJ Uzama had 3 catches in, I think, just shy of 100 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Khalil Herbert, well, surprising, right? I mean, Herbert was dropped last week because Damian Williams is coming back, and it was a tough matchup against Tampa, and he balled out. So he's one of those guys that appeared on the drop list, and now he's back here on the added. Jared Cook, Kirk Cousins, Randall Cobb, as we talked about it off the top of the show. It does seem like this is a good opportunity, at least for Randall Cobb here, with Alan Lazard and Devontae Adams all but ruled out for tomorrow. Boston Scott also on this list. Carson Wentz. Lazard is on this list. And then Robert Tonyan. Who's the guy? Actually, we'll talk about him when we bring up the drops. Man, Randall Cobb, I guess if you're super desperate, I still see him hanging around some of my waiver wires. Like, I probably won't rank him as a top 30 wide receiver, but man, you could probably play him as a flex or a wide receiver 3 this week.
I don't know why anyone dropped Khalil Herbert last week. I don't know how he's most added. I don't know why. What leagues are we playing in? I need to know. Get me in these leagues. Now we have 2 Eagles running backs on this list as well. We've been in on Gainwell for a little bit. Obviously, he's going to be, the big guy this week. But I even told you, similar to a lot of weeks, late in the season, if you're deep in the priority, I'm settling for Boston Scott, and I don't hate it. Boston Scott getting a lot of the groundwork. Now, granted, though, this is contingent on the Eagles having to run the ball. If they don't run the ball, then Kenneth Gainwell is the value. That's why he's so high. Your boy Carson Wentz, I do want to shout him out, and maybe he's going to have a bad week this week because of it. He's in line for a huge week this week in terms of just real life football. He's going against the Titans. This is a make or break matchup, I think, for the Colts here. They're trying to trend up. They've been trending up. The Titans also going up. If they could win this game, they go to 4-4, get within a game of the Titans. He's been playing really, really well. The Titans D, I know they shut down the Chiefs last week somehow. I don't know how they only scored 3 points. I still can't make sense of it. But if Wentz can perform this week, man, I think think you got to start putting respect on his name. I appreciate seeing some people add him. I have him in our FTN Yahoo League. I've held him for a while. He's been steady. He's not going to, his ceiling isn't all the way there, but his floor is pretty solid. He's at like 15, 16 points, worst case scenario. So, if you need a guy, he's a nice little bye week pickup, but I'm just excited from a real life standpoint to see his name on that list because that's a big game. I think that's probably one of the better games and matchups of the week.
I agree. Yeah, we could see a high total. You know what, Carson Wentz, I'm here for it, man. A lot of people just hate on this guy. I want to see him succeed. I want to see him prove all the doubters wrong. A lot of Colts fans that I know were not happy with the addition of Carson Wentz. They think he's fragile. They don't think he's a good quarterback. And he looks a lot like the 2017 Carson Wentz with Frank Reich. You're right. I mean, it's 4 straight games now with at least 2 passing touchdowns and 0 picks. He only has 1 interception this season, and it was a weird interception inside the red zone against the Los Angeles Rams, arguably the best secondary in the NFL. He's had at least 19 fantasy points in every start but 1. Not only does he get the Titans this week, and you're right, maybe a little bit of an outlier with that secondary just having their way with Patrick Mahomes, but they get the Jets next week. They get Jacksonville week 10. Those are pretty good spots. Week 12 against Tampa is a tough one, but you're going to have to throw the football there. And then week 13 in Houston against the Texans. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 plus matchups over the next 6 weeks. Buffalo is sprinkled in there, a tough matchup in Buffalo. Always a tough place to play. Defense is good, and the weather is always crazy there in Buffalo. But man, Carson Wentz has been good. You're right. He's not even throwing the ball that much. He's been accurate throwing the football. I like that call a lot.
You gotta love it if you're an Eagles fan. Gotta love it if you're an Eagles fan, Meaney. We're counting.
The condition is they get the first pick if they make the playoffs, and he plays, I think, 75% of the snaps, and he's playing. Knock on wood. He's been healthy, and you're right. This is a big game for the Colts this week. If they can win this football game, they can get into that playoff picture. It's wide open in the AFC. I mean, it really is in terms of wild cards. So, a lot of teams are still very much in it. We were sitting here after 7 weeks, and the Bengals are 5-2, and Las Vegas is 5-2. Like, no disrespect to those two teams, but it's wide open in the AFC. A couple other names here before we break and get to drops that aren't on this list. Samaje Perine, I get it. I get this ad. I think I would do it, especially if you're a Joe Mixon owner, just to kind of handcuff him. Set yourself up here now for a playoff run as we're into week 8. This isn't an ad if you need somebody to play this week and you're out of the playoffs. If you're comfortably in a playoff spot, and I say comfortably, things can change, but if you're 5-2, you're 6-1, you're up near the top here, and you have Joe Mixon, handcuff this guy because you don't know at any moment he could go down, and Samaje Perine could be a guy that you could just plug in. There's other guys on this list here. MVS, Emmanuel Sanders, I was surprised was dropped. He's picked up. Brennan Bolden, we think we addressed that maybe on Monday and on Tuesday as well. I think last week was just one of those scenarios where, you saw 3 Patriot backs inside the top 12 in fantasy for the week. They just blew out the Jets. Jarvis Landry, I think, is a pretty good ad. And then how about Kadarius Toney, dude? I don't know the status on this guy. He may not play this week. It may be a couple weeks, but don't you think he's a really good stash for what you saw in like a 2.5 game sample size? His ownership in Yahoo is 51%. He's available in some leagues.
I had to drop him this week. And it's funny you mentioned Emmanuel Sanders because he was a guy I forced myself to keep last week. It depends. It depends your situation because a lot of question marks involving him. We don't know the severity of the injury. They've kind of been hush-hush about it. Depends how deep your bench is and how your buys are and where your injuries are. I'm in leagues I don't have IR spots, which should not be allowed. Shout out to Jake Seeley, band kickers. Put IR spots. IR spots. Come on. Let's be fair here. Yeah. So it depends how deep your bench is. I mean, I would love to stash him. And I think he might be a buy low kind of guy if he continues in this trend in deeper leagues or deep dynasty leagues for later this season. But this week in particular, I think it's just tough because we're still getting through bye weeks. I know there's only 2 this week, but still, it's hard. I mean, as a guy who's handling a lot of injuries and a lot of IRs and buys, you just don't have rooms. Like if you have like Tyler Bass as your kicker last week, you don't want to drop Tyler Bass, but it's like, things have to be made. You gotta move some pieces around. So it's weird. You got kickers, you got defenses, there's a lot going on in these nitty gritty.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, you proceed with caution. I think it's you're right. If you're needy, it's all about context. But if you're needy, you probably don't pick him up. But again, if you're comfortable inside of a playoff spot, maybe you add that guy. Maybe you stash him and you hope that he comes back sooner rather than later. A couple other guys here before we break, I'll just throw out there. T.Y. Hilton, again, not 100%. Don't know if he's going to play this week. Just talked about the Colts schedule. Paris Campbell on IR. They need a second option other than Michael Pittman. There's going to be some games that they have to throw the football here. A little bit more coming up on the schedule. So T.Y., if you can afford to potentially stash him. Laviska Shenault is hanging around waivers at 56%. Michael Carter, probably your last chance to grab this guy. Ty Johnson is interesting in deep leagues as well. I don't know who the heck is going to start for the Jets. I think it's going to be Mike White. It could be Joe Flacco. Jake Seeley thinks it's Joe Flacco. He's a sharp dude. He seems to be right more than not, but I kind of disagree with him. I think they just roll out Mike White, honestly. I think they just throw him out there, and Flacco's just a guy who's just there for support. And then also KJ Osborne, I think, in deeper formats as well, because he was probably dropped, and he's been okay in a pinch. And then our guy, how could I forget? Our guy, Khalif Raymond, against the Eagles this week, probably going to light
Started him against you last week. He gave me a good effort last week. Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah. You almost beat me with Khalif Raymond. No, it's not. The reason you lost was because Dearness Johnson just had a game of his life. That was so lucky. I was lucky to be able to get him. That's the only reason you lost there, sir. All right, we'll break and we'll take a look at the most dropped players, whether these guys should have been dropped. And of course, there's going to be one on this list that will appear next week, and we'll find out who that guy is. Mean Streets continues here next on Game Plus Network. Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. Tino Rodriguez, producer Tino here with me, Chris Meaney, of course. We're seeing some questions kind of roll in here. We'll get to them a little bit. Some shot prop stuff will happen here towards the end of this show. We want to just continue here with some fantasy football talk and take a look at some roster trends and the most dropped players. Tino, let's bring up this board. Every week we do this. There's always one guy that is on this list that appears on the most added list. I want to get your thoughts on who you think it could be here in a moment. Excuse me. Sam Darnold up at the top. Damian Williams, Devontae Freeman, O.J. Howard. It makes sense, the Howard thing with Gronk coming back here. Rashad Penny. I mean, everybody just had to pick him up last week. They saw him touch the ball 6 or 7 times, and that's it. They had enough. No more Rashad Penny. I don't get it. If you're a Rashad Penny truther, don't give up just from the one game. I mean, just hold him, I guess, for one more game. But I guess I think he's a waste of a roster spot. Ricky Seals-Jones, I don't understand this one. He's been pretty productive. Brendan Ayuk, Mike Davis, Tim Patrick, and then Tua Tagovailoa. I guess with all of these rumors and all these reports, tough spot this week against the Bills. And he was just a streamer, I suppose, with 6 teams on bye last week and a good spot against the Atlanta Falcons. His future does... there's reports every day when it comes to Tua. It seems like 30 teams in the NFL are interested in Tua. The only one that doesn't seem to be interested in Tua is Miami. So we'll see what happens there with those reports. But, dude, who's the guy on this list that's going to be in the top 10 ads next week? Who do you think it would be?
So this is a PSA because I think this is a general statement here. Stop dropping running back. It is not the time of year to be doing this. Look, I know you're upset at Mike Davis for dropping a 1-point spot, but he was double digits every week before that. Cordero Patterson, breakout candidate of the year, right? Fantasy stud league winner of the year right now. Okay, that's great. What if something happens? Who's getting all that passing work out of the backfield? Who's getting all the touches? Mike Davis. Devonta Freeman, I understand it's his bye. He just had one of his better weeks of the year. Why are we dropping him? We don't know Latavius Murray's status, and even if we do, that's a revolving door of running backs. And then it's Damian Williams. I know Khalil Herbert's doing so great, but it's again, same thing. Montgomery's out a little bit longer. Herbert, as great as he is, one play away. So it's like a lot of these guys have put up double-digit fantasy weeks, and I just don't know if you have the luxury. I mean, maybe you do, but to be dropping starting running backs. I mean, Mike Davis will still go out there and start in the backfield. So I don't know. Stop dropping running backs, please. I'm trying to help you.
I agree. And honestly, when we bring this stuff up, and I think people may be watching and they're saying, like, a lot of these guys haven't been dropped in my leagues. And you know what? It could be shallow 8-10 team leagues. It's certainly possible. But I agree with you. This is something that we continue to stress on this show when it comes to running backs, because we honestly have a track record of this, guys. Like, it has been, I'm pretty sure, every week, but maybe one, where there's somebody on the most drop list that appears on the most added the following week, and it's usually a running back. I can't remember all of them on the top of my head. Like Zach Moss has been one. We saw Myles Gaskin was one. Yeah. I think Leonard Fournette may have been one at the start of the season. Like, Leonard Fournette was one of those guys that was dropped early on, and now this guy's a league winner.
The 1 week Henderson got hurt, Michelle was right there. It's just like, and it's not even long term. It's just a week to week thing. Like, all of a sudden they're going to be the most added because a guy has a calf strain or something. But it's like, you want to have these guys so you can plug and play and get that workload. And, you know, if you send them out to the wire, it's a free for all. You know, you don't have that right to them anymore. So
we just saw last week in week 7, 13 running backs, and I think 9 of them were all waiver wire pickups. They were all waiver wire pickups that finished as top 13 running backs in fantasy. I get it. There were some top injuries, like there was no Saquon, there was no CMC, and there were 6 teams on bye. So it was a little bit of a weird week for sure. But just again, you never know who's going to be the next man up. And if anything does happen to Cordarrelle Patterson, or if he suffers an injury, you know what? I'm not over exaggerating here. Mike Davis could be a league winner. We would be talking about Mike Davis as a guy who would get at least 10 carries on the ground and catch 4 or 5 passes out of the backfield, which I think a lot of people expected to get out of Mike Davis. Nobody expected to see this breakout from Cordarrelle. Maybe just you, Tino. But nobody else really saw this coming. And you've been riding the wave, and good on everybody. Continue to ride the wave. Continue to roll out Cordarrelle Patterson week in and week out and watch the points pile up. It's his world. We're just living in it. But Mike Davis is a guy who could really be, honestly, a league winner if anything did happen to Cordarrelle Patterson. So I'm seeing his ownership now. It's still pretty high at 84% in Yahoo leagues. He's owning a majority of my spots, leagues that I'm in. But I will be knocking on the doors like a cheap flyer, maybe in a deep league, or just grabbing him where I can as like some running back depth. There's other guys on this list that I wanted to touch on. Robbie Anderson. What do you do? I mean, do you have any shares of Robbie Anderson?
In that league I played you. Yeah, in that league I played you. In that dynasty is the only share I have Robbie Anderson. So I can't really drop him because my team's just dead, and I don't really – we're rolling out Khalif Raymond, so it's kind of hard. But if I'm
Falcons this week, he may be an okay start.
Dude, I don't understand it. He's getting like double-digit targets. I don't understand it. I'm fed up. I'm fed up with Robbie Anderson. I don't blame anybody for dropping him. And if he proves you wrong and he has that boom week, then he has the boom week. But it's like, to this point, I don't know how anyone who's been rolling him out there in redraft has survived to this point. I mean, I don't think you could have. He's been laying eggs. The 1 week he put up double-digit fantasy points, he lucked out on a touchdown. Like, he kind of just
a touchdown.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm over Robbie. I think. Obviously, the boom is still there, but what if Sammy is benched moving forward, right? What if Sam Darnold isn't the quarterback there moving forward, and we got to wait and see with the Watson going to the Panthers, even though that's not happening, or they try to go for another guy, or Sam turns into this QB carousel and he's not the starter all the time. Those turn into headache situations. So I don't know. I don't mind dropping him, but in some leagues, I do understand you have to hold on to him, especially like, we've said 3 wide receiver leagues that you have to start with injuries. It's not worth the ceiling. It's not bad to take the shot on the ceiling, but is it worth it? Knowing what his floor is.
I agree. I think he's a hard guy to start. But I also think if I saw him on the waiver wire, I'd probably take a flyer and pick him up just in case like things start to turn around. You're right. The targets are there. He's got 49 targets, only 18 catches and 204 yards. These are some of the games: 11 targets, 5 grabs for 46, 7 targets, 2 grabs for 30, 11 targets, 3 grabs, and 11 receiving yards. Had the
How is that
touchdown, which you alluded
possible,
to.
Meaney?
I don't know. And 9 targets, 3 grabs for 14 yards. Some of it is on Sam Darnold. Some of it's also on him. He does lead the league in drops, but it's not a significant amount of drops. I think it's 7 drops. In fact, you have 3 Carolina Panthers inside the top 10 in drops. DJ Moore is there and Chuba Hubbard as well. But a good spot here against Atlanta. It could be a breakout game. Like if you told me he's going to get 8 or 9 targets against the Falcons, I want to roll this guy out. But it has been pretty tough. A couple other guys that were dropped that I'm fine with: Darnell and Mooney. I just don't think there's any hope here in Chicago with Mooney, and the same thing with Allen Robinson. It's just a guy that I just don't see how you could roll him out week in and week out. I know it's a tough guy to drop, but I mean, you may have to just move on. Nyheim Hines hasn't done anything. I didn't realize how bad he has been until I looked today. 3 fantasy points, 18, 1, 1, 3, and 8. He did have 8 carries last week for 14 yards. It's hard to drop running backs. If you can find a way to keep them and stash them in case anything happened to Taylor, then we feel better about Nyheim Hines. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that you probably need to move on from, certainly in 10-team leagues as well. Tino, let's break, and we'll talk about the most traded players in CBS leagues over the last 24 hours and see if there are any names on that list that you would be looking to trade away or acquire. Keep your lock. Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Let's take a look at the most traded players in CBS leagues over the last 24 hours. I have a free article over at ftnfantasy.com talking about buy low candidates, sell high candidates. The video is embedded into the article from yesterday with Justin Boone. We have some dynasty ads, some players to hold. And next week, we'll really look into the playoff schedule. I haven't had a chance to dive into really week 14, 15, 16, 17, but I got to do that pretty soon. So next week on this show, we'll take a look at those weeks, and that'll give you a really good idea of which players to target and which players maybe to flip away. So it's an interesting list here, Tino. There's a lot of good players on this list. I mean, Chuba Hubbard up at the top, the old Canadian boy. In fact, I actually left the number 1 player off this list. It was Miles Sanders. He's hurt, so I just wanted to leave him off the list. You're not trading for him. You're probably not getting anything in return, so I just left him off the list. I don't know what the return has been for Miles Sanders. Maybe people just get him off my roster. Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen, Zach Ertz, Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Stephon Diggs, and Zach Moss. So some pretty intriguing names here. I think people are buying low on some studs here, and people are selling high on guys like maybe Zach Ertz, who had a touchdown last week, but was 5th on his team in routes run, and he was also 4th in targets, and they run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets in Arizona. So I don't know how many looks Zach Ertz is really going to get. You heard Justin Boone on the show yesterday talk about selling DeAndre Hopkins. Basically the same reason. There are a lot of different people inside this offense, and there's been some inconsistencies with everybody inside the offense with all of the pass catchers. Who's a guy on this list that you'd be looking to get? Is it Ridley? That's a name I'm interested in.
Yeah, so I've reached out about Ridley during his bye week. Yeah, they had the bye 2 weeks ago, right? They came and played Miami. So I reached out 2 weeks ago, and Ridley fantasy owners are interested. I mean, they're willing to give him up because what you got Ridley at, he's underperformed. But with that said, he had 10 targets last week. He caught 5 of them. Look, if Matt Ryan's going to throw 40 plus times a game, which it looks like is going to be the case, I want all of Ridley. I do. And I think you can get him at a fair price. And to that point, I want Keenan Allen. Most of the people on that list are the top of the top wide receivers. I mean, I know McCaffrey's there. Some top running backs are there as well. But the A.J. Browns of the world. I think Keenan Allen and Calvin Ridley in full PPR formats, if you can get out there and listen to us and save some running back depth and are going, have a surplus of running backs that you could dish out a bunch of RB2s you could kind of package and go get a wide receiver one like those guys, I think now's the time to do it. I mean, those guys coming off a bye, the numbers still don't look great, but you know what their floors and their ceilings are. I mean, I don't think Keenan Allen has had anything less than a double-digit fantasy day this season. So, with that said, when you're drafting him, he doesn't meet the criteria. But if you're trading for him and you know that coming in, you can't ask for really much more than that, knowing you're going to get 12 out of a guy week in, week out. We just talked about how people drafted Robbie Anderson, and he's killing us. So, to have guys like Ridley and Keenan Allen who are getting the targets, who are sure-handed, will get the receptions. Right now, the only thing that's not there are touchdowns. But you got to hope that'll come. That's all you could hope. Ridley got one last week. The play was designed for him. You got to hope more design plays are coming to him. And you'd like to think that they are. These are two good passing offenses. Eventually, things will start to go their way. But there's no reason to think that, they won't continue to succeed and trend upward.
I couldn't agree with you more, dude. And I'll be honest, I have a lot of Calvin Ridley. Ask me how my fantasy teams are doing. Not great. I have him in a couple dynasty spots. People are trying to get him in a dynasty league for me. I'm just like, no way. I'm holding on. I know that Matt Ryan, there's a little bit of uncertainty with his future and who the future quarterback will be with the Atlanta Falcons. But I am not selling Ridley at this point. The only way I would consider selling Calvin Ridley is if I needed a running back in exchange where I was wide receiver heavy and I just needed an RB. You talked about the targets. So Cooper Kupp leads the NFL in targets per game with 11.6. Deebo Samuel is next at 10.4. Do you know who's third? Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, 10.4 targets per game. He's tied with DJ Moore. He's tied with Devontae Adams. That's elite, man. That's elite. You look at some of the weeks, 8 targets, 10, 11, 13. Missed the game because of a personal reason. Had a bye. And then last week, 10. You mentioned the design play for him, which he found the end zone. I'm into buying him where I can. I get that it's super concerning with the production. A lot of it's going to Cordell Patterson, and Kyle Pitts looks like an absolute beast. Over the past couple weeks, he has been a baller for the Falcons. But Calvin Ridley, if you can get this guy, I do believe now is the time. As for the other guys on this list, I would not be trying to get Allen Robinson. I'd be trying to get whatever I could for him. Elijah Mitchell is one of those guys that I understand maybe flipping because of the comes and Fran Jeff Wilson could be back this week, and JaMychal Hasty was catching balls out of the backfield. But every time Mitchell's been playing and active, he does seem to be a guy that touches the ball at least 15 times. So if you're into a running back that touches the ball 15 times and you need the help, I'd be into getting him as well. Chris McCaffrey's one of those, what we talked about with with the Seattle guys. I think McCaffrey, Tino, is probably only a get if you're at the top and you could afford to take that risk, right? That's basically it. What Justin Boone said yesterday, if you're up near the top of the standings, to have a McCaffrey come week 13, 14, 15, 16, that could be a difference maker for you. But I do believe that it is a big risk, and it's not going to be cheap to acquire McCaffrey.
And if you're at the bottom and you have McCaffrey, now's the time where you're just putting him out there. Just see what you could get. People will overpay for McCaffrey, especially someone at the top who has some pieces, on the bench that you could use. Right now, you need depth if you have McCaffrey. That's just... It's for sure. It's a thing. I have McCaffrey. You definitely need depth. There's never enough of it. And if you're going to bounce back and kind of climb up the standings, you're going to need some guys you can plug and play. I also wanted to touch on Ridley one more time. The resurgence of Kyle Pitts is only going to help Calvin Ridley because all the attention is going to start to go to Kyle Pitts. And he's blowing up, and that's great. And he's had some monster games, and that's good. But for a possession receiver like Ridley, I think it's only going to help him underneath. Send Pitts long. Let him take all the long stuff. Even Patterson. Get him going deep, and then Ridley will be underneath. And I think, again, like what we said, we're not looking for a 3-touchdown-a-game guy, 2 touchdowns-a-game guy, but you'll get 10 receptions, catch 7 of them for 70 yards. You have 14. And if he can get that touchdown, we're looking at vintage Calvin Ridley there. So, yeah. Yeah,
good call. We got about 6.5 minutes left in the show. I saw Mark Harrison. Did I miss a shot props? You didn't. We're going to finish up with shot props. We're going to have Tino join us next. One more segment with Tino. We want to talk about Game 2 of the World Series. So, quick little preview for tonight. We'll wrap up with some shot props and some NHL picks. Keep her locked. Game 2 of the World Series happening this evening. The Braves have the 1-0 game lead. They are underdogs, slight underdogs here today. We do have Max Fried up against Jose Urquidy on the bump, so plus 102, minus 105. The total here is at 8.5. Tino, 3 more, man, for the Braves. 3 more. Let's go, Braves. I think that Houston wins tonight, though. What do you think of this matchup? We do only have about 2 minutes here. What do you think?
I think Houston's pitching is in big trouble, is my overall thought. Yeah. Right now, I think their best pitcher on paper is Zach Greinke, which is not good news. Max Fried on the hill for the Braves. They have the upper hand there. I do get that the Astros are home. You know, they got handled last night. But let's not forget the Astros, who were cheating during the World Series, lost every home game against the Washington Nationals. Never forget. So with that said, it wouldn't surprise me if they lose 2 at home here. I think it'll still be a series. But, man, when you are hitting like the Braves are hitting, they put up enough run support to beat the Los Angeles Dodgers, Meaney. I think they can handle the Houston Astros. If they come out with a hot first inning again, ooh, man. Oh, man. Jorge Soler, are you kidding me? He just started playing a couple games ago. He didn't even play in the NLCS. And the guy's leading off the World Series with a home run. Unreal. And it was a bomb. He was over it.
It was a bomb. It was a bomb. I think the play tonight is the over 8.5. The Astros are one of the best teams in baseball against lefties. They're in the top 5 in average and WOBA, WRC plus. They were a team that obviously has a lot of power against left-handed pitching as well. We're seeing my guy George, he never lets us down here. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go here. Astros about to get fried. Start banging that trash can, Tino. I love it. Mark Harrison says the Astros will win this series. Yeah, it's a tough series to call, Mark. It really is. We said on the show yesterday, I'm not speaking for Tino, but Braves in 7 is something that I liked. Obviously, the Charlie Morton injury is a big blow. It is a big blow not to have that guy for, another game, a game 4. I think the play here today is Astros and the over, but I'm not going to waver from Atlanta. I do like this Atlanta Braves squad. I think they find a way to get it done. The mojo is just happening, man. They got a lot of speed as well, right? We've seen Ozzie Albies run out twice. He ran out an infield single twice yesterday, stole third, ended up tagging on, a play from the outfield. Yeah, I
getting hit and runs
really
going.
Like
they're playing small ball.
Oh yeah, they're playing small ball.
And they know it. And, some people forget this. As much as the Astros are seasoned in the postseason and they've been to the World Series, 3 out of the last 5 years or whatever it is, 4 times out of the last 5 years, the Braves have been in the postseason just as many times. They haven't been to the dance, but they've come pretty dang close. So there are a lot of guys on that team, a lot of vets that know what to do. And clearly by winning game 1, they kind of showed that. So I think we have a series. And I think you're right. I think Morton's injury is going to kind of hurt them later. But Fried's got to bounce back because as much as he's their best pitcher on paper, he got rattled in LA. And he's on the road again here. So, he can't get shell-shocked and pulled early or the Braves are in trouble.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, one more break. We got shot props and picks here next on Mean Streets. All right, welcome back to Mean Streets here one final time. Those who hung around, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out here. We're going to round out the show here with some shot props. Mark Harrison, I'm so hyped to be here live. I watch this show every day. Chris, you're a legend in my eyes. Wow, I appreciate that, Mark. That's fantastic. I'm absolutely not a legend here. And, you know, we only have a couple minutes to round out with some shot props. So let's try to provide some winners here. As we mentioned on the top of the show, we are 17 for the last 20 here this week, and the shot props have been good to us. So let's go back to them, and that's where we're going to start here. Sam Bennett, he's my guy. I just keep going back to him. He's cleared it in 5 of 6 this season, 17 of his past 23 games dating back to last season. I think he's the best play on the board here today. And those who can't find him over at DraftKings, a shout out to prizepicks.com. He's over there at prizepicks.com. You can use the promo code FTN, a 100% first deposit match of up to $100 for first-time users. If you're already signed up, refer a bud, and it's a free $25 in your PrizePicks account. So if you can't find him over at DraftKings, I have found him over at BetMGM and Caesars, Williams Hill. He's over there at 2.5. And of course, those who can bet at Bet365, he is available over there as well. He's just been so good to us. I think we have to continue to go back to him. Alex DeBrincat at 2.5. This is the first time I'm going to be in on DeBrincat this time of the year, but this is a guy who is a volume shooter. It's just a lot going on in Chicago right now. COVID has run through their team, so there's no Patrick Kane, there's no Jonathan Taves. They're also missing a couple other players. We could see DeBrincat get up to that 20-21 minute mark here this evening. He's going to get a lot of ice time. He's going to be on that power play, maybe the entire power play. So I got to take the shot at over 2.5 with him. You see Alexander Ovechkin in there. I don't think I need to explain too much. He's second in the NHL in shot attempts. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, by the way, is number 1 in shot attempts, but Ovi is number 2. He's always near the top. 10 shots in his last 2 games. He has a game this season as well with 8 shots, and it's a good spot against Detroit. Yesterday, we talked about Shea Theodore over Jonathan Marchessault. Theodore, the volume, the opportunity, the ice time, the offense being driven from the back end with no Max Pacioretty and no Mark Stone. He has at least 3 shots in 4 straight games. And look at the ice time, 25 minutes, 25 minutes, 27 minutes, 23 minutes. He's just getting a lot of ice time. And then I had a hard time, honestly, picking which Oiler or Philadelphia Flyer I'd liked the most. I'm going with Darnell Nurse. I like Zach Hyman as well at plus money. I think you stay away from Draisaitl and McDavid, who are at 3.5. Cam Atkinson on the other side is interesting, but Nurse is among the leaders in ice time. He's third on the Oilers in shot attempts. He has more shot attempts than Zach Hyman. He's going to play 5 or 6 minutes. I know that 2 defensemen on the board may, people may be like, why? Why are you going with 2 defensemen on the board here? But I think with Nurse, he's going to get the ice time. And as we transition, Tino, if you have the picks here quickly on the way out, a 6.5 game total here with the Oilers and the Flyers, we could see a lot of offense in this game. A little hesitant about the Florida Panthers. They've been my team. I want to continue to pick them until they lose. I know people are like, maybe, they're due for a loss. I don't believe in any of that nonsense. They have a matchup here against the Bruins. There's a lot of things that are going on here with the Blackhawks, legal issues, and Joe Quenneville, former coach. Who knows if he's even able to coach here this evening in this spot, for Florida. But at minus 130, I'm going to take the Panthers here against the Bruins. I like the under between Vegas and Dallas. Actually lean with Dallas. Vegas, a hard-fought game last night in Colorado, which they won. But the under between those 2 teams with Braden Holtby in the net, and then Philadelphia and Edmonton with the over. And honestly, I don't love the board. I like the shot props a lot more. I wouldn't give these picks if I didn't like them. I'm going to be betting them myself, but it may be a day to get in on a parlay. Florida, Edmonton, Toronto, that's right, going back to the Leafs. If they can't win against nobody in Chicago, then they're in big time trouble. And then Washington, you can get that at plus 535. Mark, thoughts on Giroux? I think it's okay. He's a bit of a pass-first guy. He's been shooting the puck a little bit more to start the season. I think it's okay. If there's a flyer I would go to, it would be Cam Atkinson. Cam Atkinson will probably avoid that Connor McDavid line. You're going to have Giroux and Couturier matched up against McDavid. For the most part, I think that's what the Flyers are going to do, so they may not be able to touch the puck that much. We got to get out of here. We're probably a little long here. A shout-out to everybody at Anthem Sports and Entertainment in the Toronto control room. Good luck on the ice today. Use that promo code NHL, 20% discount, and hopefully we can continue here to stockpile some money. We're back tomorrow. Cheers.